Lisa Carter looked at the clock on the wall behind the jewelry counter. It was only 2:30 in the afternoon, and she was already bored out of her mind. Tuesday afternoons at Preston's Fine Jewelry were always slow, especially when the weather was nice and most of the wealthy customers were probably at their country clubs or getting spa treatment somewhere fancy. She had been working at this high-end jewelry store on Rodeo Drive in Beverly Hills for 3 years now. 3 long years of dealing with rich people who spent more money on a single bracelet than most families spent on their cars. Lisa thought she had figured out the game by now. She could spot a serious buyer from across the room just by looking at their clothes, their shoes, and the way they carried themselves. The real customers dressed the part. They wore expensive suits, carried designer handbags, and had that confident way of walking that screamed money. They never looked at price tags because price was never an issue for them. These were the people who made Lisa's job worthwhile because they bought the expensive pieces that earned her the biggest commissions. Then there were the other people. The window shoppers, the tourists, the dreamers who wandered in just to look at pretty things they could never afford. Lisa had learned to spot these people too, and she had developed her own way of dealing with them. A polite but firm suggestion to look at the less expensive items usually sent them on their way without wasting too much of her time. Amy Brooks, her co-worker, was busy organizing some new inventory in the back display cases. Amy was newer to the job, only about 8 months, and she still treated every customer the same way, whether they looked rich or poor. Lisa thought Amy was being naive. In this business, you had to be smart about where you spent your time and energy. The store itself was beautiful, with white marble floors that gleamed under the bright lights, crystal chandeliers hanging from the high ceiling, and glass display cases that showed off thousands of dollars worth of jewelry. Everything was designed to make customers feel like they were in a palace, and for the most part it worked. The right customers felt comfortable spending their money here, and that was what mattered. Lisa was checking her phone when she heard the soft chime of the front door opening. She looked up to see an elderly man walking into the store, and her heart sank a little. This was clearly not going to be a profitable afternoon. The man was probably in his 70s, maybe older. His gray hair looked like he had just run his fingers through it, and he definitely needed a haircut. He was wearing faded blue jeans that had seen better days, the kind that regular working people wore, not the expensive designer jeans that rich people bought to look casual. His boots were brown and scuffed, the leather worn from years of use. Over his jeans, he wore a simple flannel shirt in blue and green plaid. It was clean but definitely not new, and it looked like something a man might wear to work in his garage or go fishing on the weekend. He had his hands in his pockets as he walked slowly into the store, looking around with quiet interest. Lisa watched him from behind the counter, already making up her mind about what kind of customer he was going to be. She had seen plenty of men like this before. Usually they were looking for something small and inexpensive for their wives' birthdays or their wedding anniversaries. Sometimes they were just curious tourists who wanted to see how the other half lived. The man moved through the store slowly, his weathered hands now clasped behind his back as he walked from one display case to another. He seemed genuinely interested in what he was seeing, stopping to look closely at different pieces of jewelry. His movements were careful and respectful, like someone who understood he was in an expensive place and did not want to accidentally break anything. Lisa leaned over toward Amy, who was still working on the inventory. "Here we go again," she whispered, rolling her eyes toward the elderly customer. "Another window shopper who probably thinks he's in a museum." Amy glanced over at the man and then back at Lisa. "How do you know? He just walked in." "Look at him," Lisa said quietly. "Those clothes probably came from a discount store. Those boots look like they're 20 years old. I bet he's never spent more than $50 on anything in his life." The man continued his slow tour of the store, stopping at the section where they kept the diamond necklaces. He leaned in close to read the small information cards that described each piece, taking his time to understand what he was looking at. His face showed genuine interest and curiosity, like someone who appreciated fine craftsmanship even if he could not afford it. Lisa found herself getting more annoyed as she watched him. She had work to do, and she did not want to waste time with someone who was obviously just looking around for entertainment. She had monthly sales goals to meet, and spending time with non-buyers was not going to help her reach those numbers. After about 10 minutes of watching the man examine different display cases, Lisa saw him move toward the watch section. This was where they kept their most expensive timepieces, including several Rolex watches that cost more than most people made in an entire year. The watch section was Lisa's specialty, and it was where she made most of her big sales. The man stopped in front of a particular display case and leaned in to get a better look at one of the watches inside. It was a Rolex Submariner, one of their most expensive pieces, with a price tag of $45,000. Lisa watched as he studied the watch carefully, looking at it from different angles and reading the description card with obvious interest. That was when Lisa decided she had seen enough. She had spent 3 years learning to read customers, and everything about this man told her he was wasting her time. His clothes, his appearance, his whole demeanor screamed that he was not someone who could afford a $45,000 watch. Lisa straightened her shoulders and walked over to where the man was standing. It was time to politely but firmly guide him toward something more realistic, or better yet, suggest that he might be happier shopping somewhere else entirely. She had important work to do, and she did not have time to babysit tourists who wanted to pretend they could afford luxury items. As she approached the man, Lisa put on her professional smile, the one she used when she needed to be polite but wanted to make her point clear. She was about to have a conversation that she had had hundreds of times before, with hundreds of different customers who did not belong in a store like this. Lisa walked up to the elderly man with her best fake smile. She had practiced this approach many times before, with customers who clearly did not belong in such an expensive store. The key was to be polite enough that they could not complain, but firm enough that they got the message and left without causing any trouble. "Excuse me, sir," Lisa said, her voice carrying just a hint of condescension that she hoped would not be too obvious. "I noticed you looking at our watch collection. I should probably mention that these timepieces start at around $20,000. The man looked up from the Rolex he had been studying. His eyes were a striking pale blue, and they seemed to look right through Lisa in a way that made her slightly uncomfortable, but she pushed that feeling aside and continued with her practiced routine. "Perhaps you would be more interested in our selection over there," Lisa continued, pointing toward a display case near the back of the store where they kept watches that cost between $500 and $2,000. "Those pieces might be more suitable for your needs." The man did not move toward the less expensive watches. Instead, he looked back down at the Rolex Submariner and said simply, "I am interested in this one." Lisa felt a flash of irritation. Why did some people have to make this so difficult? She had been trying to save him the embarrassment of asking about prices he obviously could not afford, but he seemed determined to waste both of their time. "Sir," Lisa said, her patience already wearing thin, "that particular watch costs $45,000. That is more than most people make in an entire year. I really do not think you understand what you are looking at here." The man's expression did not change. He continued to study the watch through the glass, his weathered hands still clasped behind his back. "What can you tell me about the movement?" he asked. Lisa was caught off guard by the question. Most of the customers who could not afford these watches never asked technical questions. They usually just looked at the pretty faces and shiny metal. But this man was asking about the internal mechanism that made the watch work. "The movement?" Lisa repeated, trying to buy herself some time to think. She actually knew quite a bit about watch movements because it was part of her job. But she had not expected this particular customer to care about such details. "Yes," the man said patiently. "Is it the 31-35 caliber movement? And what is the power reserve?" Now Lisa was really confused. These were not questions that casual browsers typically asked. The man was talking about specific technical aspects of the watch that only serious collectors or very knowledgeable buyers usually cared about. "It is a Swiss automatic movement," Lisa said slowly, "with a 48-hour power reserve." She found herself answering his question even though she was still convinced he could not afford the watch. "And the water resistance?" the man asked next. 300 meters, Lisa replied automatically. "But sir, I really think you should consider something more within your budget range. This watch is a serious investment piece." The man nodded. thoughtfully and moved to look at another watch in the same display case. This one was even more expensive, a Rolex Daytona with a price tag of $68,000. "What about this one?" he asked. "Is this the ceramic bezel model?" Lisa stared at him in disbelief. Not only was he asking about an even more expensive watch, but he was asking questions that showed he knew quite a bit about Rolex watches in general. She was starting to feel confused and a little embarrassed, but she was also getting annoyed that he was continuing this charade. "Sir," Lisa said, her voice becoming more firm, "I think you need to be realistic about what you can afford. These are not ordinary watches. They are luxury timepieces for serious collectors and successful business people. Maybe you should think this over and save up for a few years if you are really interested in owning a Rolex." The man finally looked directly at Lisa, and she felt that uncomfortable feeling again when those pale blue eyes focused on her. There was something about his gaze that made her feel like he was looking right into her soul, but she pushed that thought away. "I see," the man said quietly. His voice had a distinctive gravelly quality that seemed familiar somehow, but Lisa could not place where she might have heard it before. "Look," Lisa continued, feeling like she needed to make her point even clearer, "I have been working in luxury retail for 3 years. I know how to spot serious buyers, and I know how to spot people who are just looking around for fun. You seem like a nice man, but this is not a museum. This is a business. And these watches are serious purchases for serious people." Amy looked over from where she was working and frowned. She had been listening to the conversation, and she thought Lisa was being unusually rude, even for someone she suspected could not afford the merchandise. The elderly man continued to look at the watches, seemingly unbothered by Lisa's increasingly blunt comments. He asked a few more technical questions about different models, each question showing that he knew more about luxury watches than Lisa had expected. "The Submariner has the unidirectional bezel, correct?" he asked about another watch. "Yes, but sir, you are missing the point," Lisa said, her professional facade starting to slip. "These watches cost more than some people's cars. They are not for everyone. They are for people who have achieved a certain level of success in life." "I understand," the man said calmly. "Do you?" Lisa asked, her tone becoming more challenging. "Because standing here asking questions about watches you cannot afford is not really fair to customers who might actually want to buy something." Amy put down the jewelry she was organizing and started walking toward them. She could tell that Lisa was about to cross a line from firm sales tactics into outright rudeness, and she did not want to see a customer treated badly, regardless of whether he could afford anything or not. But before Amy could reach them, the man spoke again. "You seem very certain about what I can and cannot afford," he said quietly. "I am good at reading people," Lisa replied confidently. "It is part of my job. And right now I am reading someone who is wasting my time when I could be helping real customers." The man nodded slowly and looked back at the watches one more time. Lisa felt satisfied that she had finally gotten through to him and that he would probably leave soon. She had handled the situation professionally and efficiently, just like she had been trained to do. Amy Brooks reached the watch section just as Lisa finished her last rude comment to the elderly customer. Amy had been working at the jewelry store for only 8 months, but she had never seen Lisa treat anyone quite so badly. Even when dealing with obvious window shoppers, Lisa usually maintained at least a basic level of politeness. The elderly man seemed completely unbothered by Lisa's harsh words. He continued to examine the watches with the same quiet interest he had shown since walking into the store. There was something about his calm dignity that made Amy feel embarrassed for her coworker's behavior. "Lisa," Amy said quietly, "maybe I can help this gentleman while you take care of the inventory in the back." But Lisa was not ready to give up. She felt like she had invested too much time in this conversation to walk away now, and she wanted to make sure her point was completely clear. "No, it's fine," Lisa said to Amy. Then she turned back to the man. "Sir, I think we understand each other now. You have had a chance to look around and I have explained our price ranges. Maybe it would be best if you continued your shopping somewhere else." Amy felt her face getting hot with embarrassment. Lisa had just told a customer to leave the store, which was absolutely against company policy. No matter what someone looked like or how much money they appeared to have, they were never supposed to ask customers to leave unless they were causing actual problems. The elderly man looked at Lisa for a long moment, his pale blue eyes studying her face. Then he nodded slowly and said, "I see how things work here." Something about the way he said those words made Amy take a closer look at him. She had been focusing on organizing inventory and had not really paid attention to his face before. But now, as she looked at him directly, something clicked in her mind. The jawline was distinctive, strong and square even at his age. The eyes were not just blue, but a very specific shade of pale blue that seemed to look right through you. The way he stood, even in casual clothes, had a certain presence that commanded respect. And that voice, that gravelly tone that sounded so familiar. Amy felt her heart start to beat faster as the pieces came together in her mind. She had seen that face 1,000 times in movies, on television, in magazines. She had grown up watching westerns with her grandfather, and this man had been in many of them. More recently, she had seen him in modern movies where he played tough cops and military officers. "Oh my God," Amy whispered, so quietly that only she could hear it. But Lisa heard the change in Amy's voice and looked over at her. "What's wrong? With you?" Lisa asked. "You look like you've seen a ghost." Amy stared at the elderly customer, her mind racing. She could not believe what she was seeing, but there was no doubt about it. The man standing in front of them, the man Lisa had been, treating like a vagrant who had wandered in off the street, was one of the most famous actors in Hollywood history. "Lisa," Amy said, her voice shaking slightly, "we need to talk, right now." "I'm busy," Lisa replied, still focused on the customer she was trying to get rid of. "This gentleman was just leaving." "Lisa," Amy said more urgently, grabbing her coworker's arm. "We need to talk privately, right now." Something in Amy's tone finally got Lisa's attention. She looked at Amy's pale face and wide eyes and realized that something was seriously wrong. "Excuse me for just one moment, sir," Lisa said to the customer, her irritation clear in her voice. Amy practically dragged Lisa a few steps away from the watch display, far enough that they could whisper without being easily overheard. "What is your problem?" Lisa demanded. "I was handling the situation just fine." "Do you know who that is?" Amy whispered urgently. Lisa glanced back at the elderly man who had returned to studying the watches with the same patient interest he had shown throughout their entire conversation. "Some old guy who thinks he can afford watches that cost more than his house," Lisa said with a shrug. "I told you I'm good at reading people." "Lisa," Amy said, her voice barely audible. "That's Clint Eastwood." For a moment, Lisa just stared at Amy blankly. The name registered in her mind, but she could not immediately connect it to the man in the flannel shirt and worn jeans. "What are you talking about?" Lisa asked. "Clint Eastwood," Amy repeated. "The actor, the director, the man with no name, Dirty Harry, $1 Million Baby, Gran Torino. That is Clint Eastwood standing right there looking at watches." Lisa felt something cold wash over her as Amy's words sank in. She turned to look at the customer again, this time really looking at his face instead of just his clothes. The strong jawline, the piercing blue eyes, the distinctive way he carried himself, the gravelly voice that had sounded so familiar. All the pieces suddenly came together, and Lisa felt like the floor was dropping out from under her. "No," Lisa said weakly. "That can't be right." "Look at him," Amy insisted. "Really look at him. That's Clint Eastwood, the movie star, the guy who's worth hundreds of millions of dollars." Lisa stared at the man she had just spent 15 minutes insulting and trying to throw out of the store. The man she had told to shop somewhere else. The man she had lectured about being realistic and saving up for a few years. The man she had said was not a real customer. Clint Eastwood, one of the biggest movie stars in the world. A man who could probably buy the entire jewelry store without even checking his bank account balance. Lisa felt her legs getting weak. Her stomach dropped like she was on a roller coaster, and she thought she might actually throw up right there in the middle of the store. "Oh no," Lisa whispered. "Oh no, oh no, oh no." She had just made the biggest mistake of her career, possibly the biggest mistake of her entire life. She had insulted Clint Eastwood. She had told Clint Eastwood that he could not afford a Rolex watch. She had suggested that Clint Eastwood shop somewhere else because he was not good enough for their store. Amy watched as the realization hit Lisa like a physical blow. Lisa's face went completely white, then red, then white again. Her hands started shaking and she looked like she might faint. "What do I do?" Lisa whispered desperately. "What do I do now?" Amy looked over at Clint Eastwood, who was still calmly examining the watches as if nothing had happened. He showed no sign that he had heard their whispered conversation, but there was something in his expression that suggested he was well aware of what was going on. "You need to fix this," Amy said quietly. "Right now, before he leaves." Lisa took a shaky breath and tried to pull herself together. Her career, her reputation, maybe even her job was on the line. She had to find a way to apologize and make this right, but she had no idea how to undo the damage she had just done. Lisa stood frozen for several seconds, her mind racing as she tried to figure out how to fix the terrible mistake she had just made. Her hands were shaking, and she could feel sweat forming on her forehead, despite the cool air conditioning in the store. She had never been in a situation like this before, and she had no idea what to say or do. Amy gave her a gentle push toward Clint Eastwood, who was still standing quietly at the watch display. "Go," Amy whispered. "Apologize now." Lisa forced herself to walk back toward the man she now knew was one of the most famous actors in the world. Each step felt like it took forever, and her legs felt like rubber. She could hear her heart beating in her ears, and her mouth felt completely dry. When she reached the watch display, Lisa cleared her throat nervously. Clint Eastwood looked up from the Rolex he had been examining, his pale blue eyes meeting hers with the same calm expression he had maintained throughout their entire conversation. "Mr. Eastwood?" Lisa began, her voice coming out as barely more than a whisper. She cleared her throat again and tried to speak louder. "Mr. Eastwood, I am so terribly sorry." Clint raised one eyebrow slightly but said nothing. He just looked at her and waited for her to continue. "I had no idea who you were," Lisa rushed on, the words tumbling out of her mouth. "I mean, I should have recognized you immediately. Everyone knows who you are. I don't know how I could have been so stupid." Still, Clint said nothing. His expression remained completely neutral, giving Lisa no indication of what he was thinking or feeling. Lisa felt panic rising in her chest. She had expected him to say something, anything, that would give her a clue about how to handle this situation. But his silence was somehow worse than if he had started yelling at her. "Please," Lisa continued desperately, "let me start over. Let me show you our finest timepieces. We have some exclusive pieces that are not even on display for regular customers." She fumbled with the keys to the watch display case, her hands shaking so badly that she dropped them twice before finally managing to unlock the glass door. "This Rolex Submariner that you were looking at," Lisa said, carefully lifting the watch from its velvet display stand, "is absolutely magnificent. The craftsmanship is extraordinary. The 31-35 movement is one of the most reliable and precise movements ever created." Clint looked at the watch she was holding, but his expression remained unreadable. "And the water resistance you asked about," Lisa continued, trying to sound professional despite her nervousness. 300 meters, which makes it perfect for any water activity. Not that you would ever need to test that, of course, but it's good to know the quality is there." She realized she was babbling and tried to slow down and sound more professional. "We also have this Rolex Daytona," Lisa said, reaching for the even more expensive watch. "This is the ceramic bezel model you asked about. It's $68,000, but for someone of your stature, I'm sure we could arrange some kind of special consideration." Clint finally spoke, his gravelly voice quiet but clear. "Special consideration? Well, yes," Lisa said quickly, encouraged that he had finally said something. "We could offer you a discount, maybe 10% off, or we could throw in a complimentary service package, annual cleaning and maintenance, that sort of thing." "I see," Clint said simply. Lisa waited for him to say more, but he seemed to be thinking. The silence stretched out, and Lisa felt like she had to fill it with something. "Or if you prefer, we have some pieces in our private collection," Lisa offered. Things that are not available to the general public. Very exclusive items that only our most special customers ever get to see. She was making this up as she went along. The store did have a few extremely expensive pieces that they kept in the safe for security reasons, but they were not really reserved for special customers. They were just too valuable to keep on display. Mr. Eastwood, Lisa said, her voice becoming more desperate. I know I made a terrible first impression. I was completely unprofessional, and I'm mortified by how I treated you. Please give me a chance to make this right. Clint looked at her for a long moment, and Lisa felt like those pale blue eyes were looking right into her soul. When he finally spoke, his voice was quiet and measured. You were doing your job the way you thought it should be done, he said. Lisa was not sure if that was good or bad. She decided to take it as an opening to continue trying to make the sale. The thing is, Lisa said, I pride myself on being able to help customers find exactly what they're looking for. I have 3 years of experience in luxury retail, and I really do know these timepieces inside and out. She was back to the Rolex Submariner, holding it carefully in both hands. This particular watch has been worn by professionals in some of the most demanding situations in the world. Military personnel, deep-sea divers, pilots, it's built to last for generations. Clint nodded slightly, but Lisa could not tell if he was interested or just being polite. And of course, Lisa continued, owning a Rolex is about more than just telling time. It's about making a statement. It says something about who you are and what you've achieved in life. As soon as the words left her mouth, Lisa realized how ridiculous they sounded. She was talking to a man who had achieved more than most people could even dream of. He did not need a watch to make a statement about his success. I mean, Lisa backtracked quickly, obviously you don't need anything to make a statement about your success. Everyone knows who you are and what you've accomplished. I just meant that this watch would be a perfect addition to your collection. Clint looked at the watch again, then back at Lisa. You think I collect watches? He asked. Lisa felt another wave of panic. She had assumed he collected watches because he had asked such knowledgeable questions, but what if she was wrong about that too? I don't know, Lisa admitted. Do you? For the first time since their conversation began, Clint's expression changed slightly. Lisa thought she saw the hint of a smile at the corner of his mouth, but it was so brief she could not be sure. I was looking for a gift, Clint said. A gift? Lisa exclaimed, relieved to have some direction for the conversation. That's wonderful. Who is the gift for, if you don't mind me asking? My son, Clint replied. Lisa felt a surge of hope. A gift purchase was often easier than selling someone something for themselves, especially if the buyer was not worried about the price. That's so thoughtful, Lisa said. Does your son appreciate fine timepieces? He does, Clint said simply. Then this Rolex would be perfect, Lisa said, holding up the Submariner again. It's classic, it's elegant, and it's something he could wear every day or save for special occasions. Clint looked at the watch thoughtfully, and Lisa held her breath, hoping that she might actually be able to salvage this situation and make the sale after all. Lisa watched Clint's face carefully as he examined the Rolex Submariner one more time. She was trying to read his expression, looking for any sign that he might be interested in making the purchase. After several long seconds, he gently placed the watch back on the velvet display stand. It's a beautiful piece, Clint said quietly, his gravelly voice thoughtful. The craftsmanship is certainly impressive. Lisa felt a spark of hope. Maybe she had managed to turn things around after all. Maybe her desperate sales pitch had worked, and he was going to buy the watch despite how badly she had treated him. Initially, it really is, Lisa agreed eagerly. And I think your son would absolutely love it. It's the kind of watch that becomes a family heirloom, passed down from generation to generation. Clint nodded slowly, but then he looked directly at Lisa with those piercing blue eyes. I appreciate you taking the time to show me the watches, he said. But I think I'll look elsewhere. Lisa felt her heart sink. Mr. Eastwood, please, she said quickly. If it's about the price, I'm sure we can work something out. Or if you'd prefer a different model, we have many other options. It's not about the price, Clint replied calmly. Then what? Lisa asked, though she was afraid she already knew the answer. Clint was quiet for a moment, as if he was choosing his words carefully. When he spoke, his voice was gentle but firm. "I think I've learned everything I need to know about the service here." The words hit Lisa like a physical blow. She understood exactly what he meant, and she knew there was nothing she could say to change his mind. He was not rejecting the watches or the store. He was rejecting her and the way she had treated him. "Mr. Eastwood," Lisa tried one more time, her voice barely above a whisper. "I am truly sorry. I made a terrible mistake, and I know that. Please don't let my stupidity affect your opinion of our store." Clint looked at her with what might have been sympathy, but his decision was clearly final. "Some things can't be undone," he said simply. He took one last look at the watch display, then turned toward the front of the store. "Good day, ladies," he said politely, nodding to both Lisa and Amy. Lisa watched helplessly as Clint Eastwood walked toward the exit. She wanted to run after him, to beg him to give her another chance, but she knew it would only make things worse. Amy stood beside her, both of them watching in silence as one of the biggest movie stars in the world left their store because of how he had been treated. The soft chime of the front door seemed unusually loud as it closed behind him. For several seconds, neither Lisa nor Amy moved or spoke. The store felt different somehow, quieter and smaller than it had before. "I can't believe what just happened," Amy said finally. Lisa sank against the watch display case, feeling completely drained. "I just lost the biggest sale of my life," she said weakly. "Maybe the biggest sale this store has ever had." "It's not just about the sale," Amy replied. "You treated him terribly, and he didn't deserve that. No customer deserves that, no matter what they look like." Before Lisa could respond, she heard footsteps coming from the back of the store. Steve Martinez, the store manager, was walking toward them with a confused expression on his face. "What happened here?" Steve asked. "I was in my office doing paperwork and I heard voices, but then I looked up and saw someone leaving. Was that a customer?" Lisa and Amy exchanged glances. Neither of them wanted to be the one to explain what had just happened. "Lisa?" Steve prompted. Looking directly at her, Lisa took a shaky breath. "A customer came in looking at watches," she began slowly. "And?" Steve asked impatiently. Amy stepped forward. "It was Clint Eastwood," she said quietly. Steve's eyes widened. "Clint Eastwood? The actor? What did he want?" "He was looking at the Rolex watches," Amy continued. "The expensive ones. He asked a lot of technical questions and seemed genuinely interested." "That's fantastic," Steve said, his face lighting up. "Did he buy anything? A Rolex sale would put us way ahead for the month." Lisa felt sick to her stomach. "He didn't buy anything," she admitted. "Why not?" Steve asked, his excitement fading into concern. Amy looked at Lisa, giving her a chance to explain herself. When Lisa said nothing, Amy took a deep breath and told Steve everything that had happened. She described how Lisa had judged Clint by his appearance, how she had been rude and dismissive, and how she had basically told him to shop somewhere else. As Amy talked, Steve's face went from confused to shocked to angry. By the time Amy finished explaining, Steve's face was red with fury. "You did what?" Steve asked Lisa, his voice dangerously quiet. "I didn't know who he was," Lisa said weakly. "That doesn't matter," Steve exploded. "We treat every customer with respect and professionalism, regardless of who they are or what they look like. That's the most basic rule of retail, especially luxury retail." Lisa started to say something, but Steve held up his hand to stop her. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" Steve continued. "Clint Eastwood is not just any customer. He's a Hollywood legend. He has friends who are some of the wealthiest people in California. Word of mouth in this business is everything. And you just gave him a story to tell about how badly he was treated here." Lisa felt tears starting to form in her eyes. She was beginning to understand that this was about much more than just losing one sale. "People like Clint Eastwood talk to other people like Clint Eastwood," Steve went on. "They share experiences. They recommend stores or they warn each other away from places where they were treated poorly. You may have just cost us dozens of potential customers." Over the next few days, Lisa learned just how right Steve had been. Word of the incident began to spread through the luxury retail community in Beverly Hills. Other salespeople at high-end stores heard the story and shared it with their colleagues. It became a cautionary tale about the importance of treating every customer with respect. Within a week, Steve called Lisa into his office for a final conversation. Her employment at Preston's Fine Jewelry was over. Steve explained that the store's reputation was too important to risk, and that he could not trust her judgment with customers anymore. Lisa spent the next several weeks looking for a new job, but the luxury retail world in Beverly Hills was smaller than she had realized. Everywhere she applied, people seemed to already know about her encounter with Clint Eastwood. Some potential employers were polite but firm in their rejections. Others were more direct about why they would not hire her. The incident taught Lisa a lesson she would never forget about the importance of treating people with dignity and respect, regardless of their appearance or perceived social status. She eventually found work at a different type of store, far from Beverly Hills, where she had to rebuild her reputation from the ground up. The story of the saleswoman who insulted Clint Eastwood became legendary among retail workers throughout the area. A reminder that you never know who might walk through your door and that every customer deserves to be treated with courtesy and professionalism.